Well, we move into what some would say the dreaded step 4, principle 4. It can be scary, but it's so good to be reminded that when we think about the first 3 principles and steps of Celebrate Recovery and what they prepare us for, so good to just take this in, that these principles actually give us the gasoline, the oxygen to do the hard parts of step 4, principle 4. But what does it mean to openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust? What are we talking about when we talk about taking a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves? Today we're going to unpack the why behind step 4, principle 4, so that we can have oxygen to carry out the what. Welcome to Celebrate Recovery Official, a podcast that shares life-changing stories, courage, hope, and leadership wisdom, all centered around the Celebrate Recovery principles based on Matthew chapter 5, where Jesus equips us to courageously face our hurts and our hangups, the way we see ourselves, God, and others, and even our circumstances that may pull us into a space of unhealthy habits or defenses or protections that are coming at a high cost to the others in our life, including fellowship with God. I'm a grateful believer in Jesus Christ. I struggle with drugs and alcohol and perfectionism. My name is Rodney. I'm the Global Field Director with Celebrate Recovery, and it's so good to be back with you today. I hope you're enjoying this series that we're walking through. It's so important to understand the why behind. One of our fellow leaders actually asked me that why do we do these lessons? It can feel like busy work sometimes, but there is some good truth behind every question, every lesson that we're walking through, and it's tempting to, how do we shorten this? How do we make it faster? But when we're talking about our lives, it's so worth it to do the work that we're doing. And why would you want to rush your heart, your rhythm of your mental health, your emotional health, your spiritual health? It's a lifetime commitment. Even if you're not in a group, these become ingrained in our heart. And so as we continue the conversation, we're kind of walking through answering the why. Why do I do this? Why not just go to principle 4? And why not do it day 1? I think, while some may disagree with this, I think it's so important that you kind of soften the beachhead, so to speak. I want to, when I'm going into this battlefield of dealing with the hurts, and by the way, it's not just my faults that we're confessing, it's the hurts, hangups, and habits that we are facing. In fact, we're rewriting that to read as such. But we're confessing, we're examining and confessing those things that were done to us, as well as the things that we've done others, as hurt people. When we can live out principles 1, 2, and 3, there is a God, I'm not it. In principle 1, my life's unmanageable. Principle 2, I matter to Him. And what a great reminder that He has the power. He's willing, caring, and able and powerful to help me recover. So then, because I know that, I can put my trust in Him and turn and take action to turn my life and my will over to His care, and daily trusting Him with my will so that I can experience healing, so that now God has prepared us to do what can be scary. It's hard work to address the hurts, hangups, and habits, the things that have been done to us and the things that we've done to others, but so important as we seek Him in this space so that we can walk in that newness of life the way Christ intended. So principle 4, openly examine and confess my faults to myself, to God, and to someone I trust. And Jesus, I love the Beatitudes. As Jesus is saying, if you want to walk in blessedness, if you want to walk in blessing, happiness, now it's in spite of my circumstances. That blessedness comes from the Greek word makarios, which means blessedness in spite of my circumstances, not because of my circumstances. Just give me lots of money and make life easy and I'll be blessed. No, that's not what Jesus is saying. He's saying you can learn how to be blessed if you'll do these things in spite of the circumstances happening around you in this broken world. And so in this beatitude, through the principles of Celebrate Recovery, we're learning a principle that we're blessed when we're pure in heart. And when we have a pure heart, because otherwise it keeps us from living out the path that Christ has for us. And so step 4 is we made a searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And again, of ourselves is understanding what has impacted ourself from the others, the hurt that has been caused by others, and what of the things of a moral inventory of myself, of what I've done to others, maybe as a result. Sometimes it's in that order, sometimes it's not. But because we live in a broken world, I've hurt you, and you've probably hurt me, and that's just the way we in this world it happens. But to learn how to not let that taint and stain our heart, we're trying to have that pure heart. And Lamentations 3:40 is the verse that goes with step 4. Let us examine our ways and test them, and let us return to the Lord. So in this step, principle 4, step 4, we're actually carrying out, it's in the book 2 of the Celebrate Recovery process. We call them step study groups. In book 1, we're stepping out of denial into God's grace. In book 2, now we're taking an honest and spiritual inventory, not to shame ourselves, but to understand ourselves and to give it to the one that we consciously chose to commit our life and will to in the prior step, because he has the power. And I trust you, Lord, and I'm going to give it to you. And so in this space, we're taking that searching and fearless moral inventory of ourselves. And what are we doing in this space? Well, we're facing the truth about ourselves. And that sounds like, well, duh. But sometimes, when we are in denial and we're trying to block out pain from our past, we're not living honest with ourselves. Step 4 requires an honest assessment of where I am, what's been done to me, an assessment of my own character, an assessment of my behaviors, of my own past choices, but also the past choices of other people toward me. And what's so important is we do the good and the bad. We talk about that often as keeping it balanced, because even if you don't have, 1-to-1, good to bad, the weight of the good will match up with the bad. And so I like the image of rocks and feathers. A brother of mine used this one time years ago, and I love the picture of this. If you have 1,000 pounds of rocks and 1,000 pounds of feathers, they're the same weight, but there may be more feathers than there are rocks. So sometimes those bad things can take one rock to a bunch of feathers or vice versa, but we're not trying to do a 1-for-1. We're just trying to keep it balanced as a whole. So we're trying to assess the character of ourselves, our behaviors, the behaviors done to us, our past choices, and that's why we talk about my part. What do I need to own in this? And that's where the protections and that kind of stuff, but our habits, defenses that we've developed through the years is what are those past choices I've done? And then what's the damage and effect of the choices done to me? Because that can actually affect our choices, not to excuse it or to justify it, but to understand it. So we're in this step. You can see why it's so important that we take that searching, fearless, moral inventory of ourselves, to examine, to confess. And that word confess is just to say the same thing. That's the literal meaning in the Greek. And it's just a good understanding. God already knows what is true. He just wants us to come alongside him, because he knows, as that Lamentations, he wants us to return to him. And he knows that if we deny and we don't live in truth of what has happened to us and what we have happened to others, what we've done to others, then we can't walk in good fellowship with him. He said, let us return to the Lord, right? That's what we're trying to do. So That's that. Let us examine our ways and test them. Let us return to the Lord. So by embracing this truth of things done to me and done to others, we're hitting head on. We're confronting, we're having a healthy confrontation with our denial as we begin to take responsibility for our actions, responsibility for what has been done to us that we've tried to manage under our own power. The things that happened to me in my abuse growing up were not my fault, but they did become my responsibility. So by acknowledging the things that happened to me, I'm taking responsibility on how I deal with that. I don't have to. I'm not designed, God, I'm going to give you all my stuff that I've done, but I'm going to hold on to the stuff that's done to me, and I'll deal with that because I know you only died for my sins. No, when we look at the cross, he died for the sin done to you as well as the sin you've done toward others. And when we can confront that, embrace that truth, and take responsibility for all of those actions done to us and we've done to others, that leads to growth and healing. Isn't that a beautiful thing? So what we're doing then, because we face the truth, we're acknowledging those hurts, those hangups, those lies that we're believing. That's that damage and effect column, which we don't want to get too hung up in the two different columns. But we're trying to address the lies that we may be believing about ourselves, God, and others, and circumstances that may not line up with his word. And maybe as a result of what we're believing, take us into unhealthy habits and protections and defenses to own that. But what's the damage? What's the emotions that I feel in that space because of the things done to me? What's the damage and the effect of the things that I've done to others? So when we identify these specific areas in our life where we've been hurt and where we've hurt others, including those harmful habits and attitudes and behaviors, all that, God begins to do something new in us. And that's why we have several lessons attached to this principle and step. In book 2, right, as we're taking an honest and spiritual inventory, we're first in lesson 7 addressing, hey, you got to have someone by your side. That's why we cover the sponsor lesson. I can't do this alone. I've got you, God, but I need another guy if I'm a guy. And ladies, you need another lady, a mentor to walk through this. And then we kind of get into the moral. This is where we're kind of confirming our commitments, making a plan. What am I going to do? We move into the inventory in lesson 9. So we're hitting 7, 8, and 9. And 9 is kind of getting into the chart and that columns I was just talking about. And then ultimately, we're getting into the meat of it with spiritual inventory part 1 and spiritual inventory part 2, which is really kind of peeling the layers of the onion, right? And it's like, man, that sounds like a blast. It's not easy. It's not fun, but it's so worth it. So in inventory part 1, spiritual inventory part 1, we're kind of tackling those relationships with others, our priorities in our life. Then we're beginning to kind of examine our attitude and ultimately our integrity. Spiritual integrity is knowing I can't face this on my own. So Romans 3:23, for all have sinned, that means all of us, and all fall short of the glory of God. That's in Romans 3:23. What we're doing when we acknowledge our hurts, hangups, and habits is we're recognizing that these areas allows us to bring them into the light and start addressing them with honesty and accountability. I don't have to live in darkness anymore, no matter what I've done, no matter what's been done to us, which can bring up shame and we hide. We can bring them to the light and we can begin to experience that healing. So what we're doing is in this process is as we acknowledge those, we're identifying patterns and root causes. Is trying to understand what are the good reasons why I'm doing what I'm doing. So I love just kind of as I think about my own inventory, as I connect with my sponsor, I'm looking for reoccurring patterns, reoccurring thoughts that I think, reoccurring actions and behaviors that I want to explore those underlying good reasons behind them. Not right reasons, but good reasons. Matthew 7:18 says, a good tree cannot bear bad fruit, and a bad tree cannot bear good fruit. We're trying to cleanse that pure heart. As Jesus said, blessed are we when we have a pure heart. So what an important step this is to help us understand why certain behaviors and attitudes do exist, allowing us to break those unhealthy cycles. We're trying to address those root causes. We're not bringing this stuff up to shame ourselves, but to understand it. And if we can understand it, we can find clarity as we give it to the one that we, in the prior step, that we consciously chose to turn our life and will over to bring healing in our life. We're bringing it to him to understand that so that he can ultimately bring some new ways of healthy practices, healthy truths, as he brings healing to our hurt. So important. So take a super quick break right there. When we come back, we'll continue the conversation of the why, and why are we doing this step 4, so that we can have oxygen to carry out the what. Stick with me. I'll be right back. Hey friends, we have an online meeting that meets every single Wednesday at noon Pacific. If you'd like to join people from all over the world to hear a mini-moni, a devotional, and then join gender-specific open share groups where a big part is just listening and realizing we're not alone. Join us every Wednesday at noon Pacific. You can go to celebraterecovery.com and find a link there and join us. And by the way, if you're looking for a group, you can find a group in your area to join in person as well. Go to celebraterecovery.com, and we hope to see you soon. We're identifying patterns of root causes. We're facing the truth. We're acknowledging our hurts, hangups, and habits, and then we're identifying patterns and root causes. And then here's the big part of this process is we're taking responsibility for our own actions now. I kind of hit on that earlier, and we're talking about facing the truth. But now we've identified those root causes. Now we can justify those, or we can take responsibility. And step 4, principle 4, is now inviting us into a new space to take responsibility for our past mistakes without blaming others. You know, for too long, I justified my behaviors and my addictions and compulsive behaviors as, well, I grew up in a broken home. 10 stepfathers, physically, verbally, emotionally, sexually abusive, and I can justify my behavior. But don't forget Romans 14:12, Rodney. Each of us will give an account of ourselves to God. I am responsible for my actions. While it made sense that I went to do what I did to numb out and stay alive as a kid, there's a cost today, and it keeps me out of fellowship. It keeps me out of healthy connection with others. So I had to take responsibility for my actions. I had to own the hurt done to me and allow Jesus to heal that one hurt at a time. This is what they did, this is how it impacted me, and I'm raising it up to you to nail it to the cross, Father. And then own my part in asking for forgiveness as I learn to forgive the others. This is and we talk about that later, but this whole process is ultimately taking responsibility to empower me to move from being a victim. I'm a victim. No, you're not a victim. You have been victimized, but you are a victor. And this process is helping us to walk as a victor, to take control of our recovery, to take control of our healing process. We're not responsible for the healing process, but our part is taking it to him. It's like going to the doctor and saying, I'm sick. If we don't ever tell him what's hurting and what's actually happening, it's hard for him to heal. Jesus can heal without us saying this, but he knows the confessing is how we are wired. That's how he created us. To speak it out loud helps it to lose power, to invite the healing process. So we got to take responsibility, but then we got to forgive ourselves and others. Now, there is a process later in Principle 6 as we get into this down the road, but we're beginning the process to learn how to forgive ourselves. Part of that inventory process involves recognizing where I need to forgive. We'll deal with it later, but just recognizing it. Where do I need to forgive others? Where do I need to forgive myself of past hurts and failures? Colossians 3:13 says, bear with each other and forgive one another if any of you has a grievance against someone. So we're just in this process of just trying to identify, here's some people I'm going to have to make amends to later. These are some people I'm going to have to forgive, and I'm going to have to learn how to forgive myself. You may not be ready to do it now, but this is a process of getting us to that next step, the forgiveness process of giving and receiving that will ultimately free us from that bitterness, that guilt that I had to work through in my own recovery to create new space for something new and different, for peace and healing in our life. And so this is just the process of identifying that, and then ultimately invite God's grace in the healing process. And sometimes it takes time, but we can bring all these things that we found in doing this moral inventory and spiritual inventory part 1 and the spiritual inventory part 2, right? All these things that had us stuck. Because in part 2, we're kind of getting into our mind, our body, our family, and our church, the cost to us beings kind of hidden in this pain that's been done to us, or the pain that we've done to others through our shame. And so we're learning how to invite God's grace and healing into our life. And when we bring these findings to God, these things that have been revealed, we can ask Him, Lord, would you heal this? Heal my heart as I give to you and nail to the cross what they did to me. Help me to learn through the process to forgive. Help me to heal the brokenness in my heart so I can make the necessary changes through your power, the work of grace. We have the will of grace to come and give us our salvation. Don't forget the work of grace, His power working through us, and that's what He's doing in this process. Psalm 51:10, create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me. That's what we're doing to bring healing, a right spirit, a clean heart. And as we bring this inventory to God, He begins to, we learn how to allow Him to begin transforming those broken areas of our life. What a beautiful process. Hard, but worth it. And when we got people around us, sponsors, an accountability team, and the Father, as we go to the meetings and we share and we work our process, trusting Him and wait on Him and our hope in Him, He begins to transform the broken areas of our life. So in this process, and we'll talk more about this, we're beginning the process of continuing the conversation about inviting other people into that, to confess our sins to each other and pray for each other so that we can be healed. And there's a right time for this, and we'll talk more about that. But this is all getting us prepped. That's why Lesson 9 is kind of a cool worksheet just to organize our thoughts so that when we do sit down with that trusted person later, and we'll talk more about that in a future podcast, this is where we begin to kind of release that and allow God to heal that, to release that burden, to release the secrets, to invite accountability. It opens that door for deeper healing and connection for us. And ultimately, the why behind step 4 is to embrace the process of ongoing growth. It's hard for me to grow and face tomorrow's sufferings, because in this world we will experience sufferings. If we don't deal with past sufferings, tomorrow's sufferings will bump into our past sufferings, and it makes it a little bit more unbearable. The inventory process is this ongoing process, and we'll talk about that more in future podcasts, but we're trying to kind of clean the basement up. Right? If you imagine going down in your basement and you just open these rooms that have padlocks on them, if I can open one room at a time and take that padlock off and clean up that room, and then go to the next room and clean it up, what kind of value would that bring to your home? And that's exactly what's happening for our hearts in that space. One room at a time, we're cleaning that basement up. So this inventory process will help us to kind of deal with yesterday's struggles so that we have endurance and perseverance for today's and tomorrow's to help us grow in our recovery and our healing process. Philippians 3:13, but one thing I do, Paul says, forgetting what is behind and straining toward what is ahead. Let me be clear. He's not saying, act like that didn't happen. No, in order to forget what is behind, I have to acknowledge what is behind so I don't get stuck in the past, so that I can strain forward. But if I've got this baggage, this stained heart that's happened, it's going to keep me from walking in that fruit and freedom. So step 4 is not a step 4 is not a one-time event, but a continual process of self-reflection. We'll talk about that more later, but it's this process of growth that deepens my recovery. It strengthens my relationship with God. And by working this step, guys, we gain such incredible clarity about ourselves, about our story. Embracing our story is so smart, and it tells so much about ourselves. It gives us clarity on ourselves, our story, our past. It allows God to bring healing and transformation to our life. I don't know about you, but I don't, when I look back on my life, I don't like that I carried that baggage for so long. The enemy convinced me that it would be worse to bring it into the light. And the reality is, keeping it in the dark kept me in the dark. It's such a difficult step, but don't miss that it's worth it. It's a courageous step that leads us toward freedom and deeper recovery. And so if that enemy starts feeding lies into you, why would you want to do that? Why would you want to face the truth, to acknowledge those hurts, hangups, and habits? Why would you want to even focus on those patterns of root causes and take responsibility for your actions, to learn to ultimately forgive others and yourself, to invite God's grace and healing and share that with another person? Will they love you? Will they leave you? All those things the enemy lies to us. He tries to keep us from embracing the process and ongoing growth. And boy, that's dangerous. And it is hard. It is a lot of work. But when we know, principle 1, there is a God and I'm not it. When we know we matter to him and he has the power, and we've made that big choice to turn our life, to consciously and deliberately choose to turn our life and will over to his care and control, with God on our side, we can face those giants. I've got God. With God by my side, I can do this. When my knees begin to buckle as I move into step 4, principle 4, hey, I've got a powerful army of accountability and sponsor around me, and I've got God Almighty to carry me through, and that gives us the oxygen to carry that through. Hope that it brings a little bit more clarity to the why, to the what of step 4, principle 4. But hey, listen, this is a scary process. I don't want to set you up and say, oh, this is so simple. It is hard. But anything hard is worth doing. That's how God builds endurance and strength in us. And you can do this. Here's the cool thing. We're batting 1,000 globally. No one has ever died from doing principle 4, step 4. And I'm convinced that you won't either. I think you'll find life versus death. Hey, if you're struggling, don't face this alone. Join us at a meeting near you. Go to celebraterecovery.com, find a group near you, and we hope you'll join us. But hey, thanks for being with me today. I pray that you'll join me next time. Until then, God bless you guys.